Hey everybody, I'm Ziggy Alberts and this is Sober Awkward.
The kettle's boiled, Vic.
Great. Perfect timing. Just a dash of milk for me, please, mate.
Here you go. Shall we get started then?
Have you ever woken up on a Sunday morning and said, I'm never drinking again, and then found yourself waving $50 at a barman by happy hour?
Are you wondering why everyone else can stop at 1 while you head to a dodgy after-party with a weird bloke called Disco Dave? If so, it might be time to take a deeper look at your relationship with your reliable social crutch, alcohol.
On each episode, we'll investigate our own dysfunctional dealings with booze and find out if it's possible to stop this deeply ingrained habit before things get too messy.
Yep, we're going to open up a shame shed of humiliating drinking stories to help you understand why waking up from a booze coma each weekend with a kebab sticking out of your top pocket might actually be negatively impacting your health.
Hamish and I are here to delve into what it's like being sober, an unwanted warts and all look into why giving up those cheeky pints or putting down those mummy wines will make you feel happier, help your anxiety and mental health, and turn you into the most sparkly, authentic version of you.
Won't that mean I become boring though, Vic?
Well, Hamish, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm Victoria Vanstone.
I'm Hamish Adams-Cairns.
And this is Sober Awkward.
Do you know what's weird about today's episode, Vic?
What?
Not once during the whole time that we hung out with one of Australia's greatest singers did you show me your musical talent.
I know, what, my mouth trumpet?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I was scared that he would be so impressed and would ask me to probably come on tour with him. What do you think? I'm sure he's got a horn section.
I don't know if he has a mouth horn section.
Yeah, I'm not sure. He needs to get one. If he did ask, I'd probably be forced to leave John and the kids and travel around the world with him.
Would that be a tough decision to make?
No, I don't think so. I'd be out of here before John even got back from work, quite honestly.
And you know what? The tour would be better off for having you awkwardly standing at the back of the stage doing your mouth trumpet.
Everyone would love it. The Sober Awkward fans would love it. In all seriousness, Haim, our guest today has just set off for the Australian and New Zealand legs of his tour. He will be on the road between now and the end of November, so we thought this would be a perfect time to talk to him.
Ziggy Alberts is a singer-songwriter and author who has established himself as one of Australia's leading independent artists.
He's a Sunshine Coast legend, a genuine grassroots story that has lifted his artistry into universal acclaim, captivating audiences across the globe, a testament to his songwriting ability and incredible live shows.
Ziggy's career is a family affair. He founded his own independent record label and publishing house, Common Folk, in 2018, which he then signed himself onto, and he employs his family members to run the show.
As a result of this, Ziggy has the rare ability in the music industry to tell a story on his own terms.
His 6th studio album, Dancing in the Dark, is no exception, providing yet another example of how he showcases his artistic growth and shares his ever-evolving story with the world. Ziggy has over 1.6 million monthly listeners on Spotify alone, which is the same amount that we've had the entire history of our podcast.
Yeah.
Basically, all of his songs get millions of listens.
Amazing. And all of this at 29 years old. And of course, no prizes for guessing, Ziggy has soared to the top of the music industry whilst sober.
We covered a lot in this chat, so I want to keep this intro as short as possible, so let's get straight into it. Enjoy my chat with Ziggy Alberts.
Enjoy.
So let me begin by saying welcome to Freddie's bedroom, aka the studio. You are next to our 2-foot green dinosaur. First impressions of the Sober Awkward studio?
I think it's like all studios should be. You know, it's totally impromptu, and I've done a lot of recordings, podcast, and actual studio recordings in very unassuming places. I have put on the T-Rex. I wish we had a visual. My speed dealer sunglasses, and
yes.
So I feel like we're ready.
The dinosaur's never been spoilt like it has just been by you. We neglect it, really. We never put clothes or sunglasses on it.
It needs silver speed dealers, I think.
You're right. Okay. We'll look to invest in some of those. And it's so lovely to actually speak to someone who is from the coast. Usually our chats are like on Zoom with someone in the UK or America. It never works. There's always delays. One of the microphones always fucks up. It's very awkward to start, so it's like a treat to have you here. Also nice to speak to someone who lives on the Sunshine Coast. You understand that aeroplanes go over this part of town quite regularly, and that's not a weird thing for you to deal with.
It is, yeah, no, the feeling is mutual. It is so many things we do remotely and so many podcasts we do by need and necessity, but anytime you can literally roll over and do an in-person, for me it's an absolute charm. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thank you, and thank you for squeezing us in. I know you leave on tour next week, a week today, right?
That's exactly, yeah.
Okay. What does the week in the lead up to a tour look like? Are you just spending maximum time with friends, family, and in the ocean? Is there work to do, or is it downtime?
That's a good question. It is, for me, I'm a relatively frenetic person at home.
Okay.
And I also started a record label, an independent record label with my family 5 years ago. So anytime I'm home is like a return to being a pseudo adult, which is, which I want to run away from all the time. And so I am looking to put on the brakes a bit before tour starts, just to kind of, I guess over the next week, I will try and see what is truly necessary for the tour to be successful and what I can do to not go into the tour burnt out, which easier said than done. Again, with my sort of personality, I've just, I was up, as we talked about before the podcast, I was up at 5:15 doing 7.5K run this morning with friends. So I'm not necessarily the best person at chilling. I'm learning.
Pseudo adult. This room is not a pseudo adult room. You can be as childish as you want. We did spend the pre-interview talking about coffee machines and woodwork, which was very adult of both of us, but feel free to talk about farts and anything you want in this space. That is the majority of the podcast, is us making cock and balls jokes and talking about farts. So.
Okay, and you know what? It's been a great, what a pretty, we went from homeware and archway doors and bathrooms to dinosaur with speed dealers. I feel like we're really covering all topics.
That's
here.
it. That is the podcast in a sentence. So what struck me in researching you ahead of this conversation is that drinking alcohol, to a certain extent, is about conventionality, right? We grew up around it. All of our friends do it. Our family does it. So we just sort of end up doing it. And your life has been anything but conventional. So homeschooled until you were 13. You then set up your own record label, like you just alluded to, employed your family to run it. Then you started releasing poetry because why not? You obviously have a passion for it. You can write well. So I guess my first question is, do you think that the unconventionality of your life helped with the idea of not drinking because everyone else does?
Yes, and I'll delve into why. I think overarchingly, absolutely. Growing up homeschooled, particularly before, at the time when my folks were homeschooling us, it was still are you trying to damage your child? It wasn't a cool, trendy,
okay, yeah.
it wasn't niche. It wasn't something cute. It wasn't farmer's market. It was are you trying to damage your child? And so credit to them through the 90s before it was cool. Everything's a little edgy before it's cool. And that was homeschooling as well. I think that homeschooling allowed me to perhaps be the individual that I am. And when you are in a conformist arena day in, day out, i.e. school, and that's not to call it good or bad, but to the least it is about conforming to whatever the rules and regulations are there. Cool. And so I think that it's also potentially not the place that you're going to always shine as an individual. In fact, I think it's incredible how many individuals come out of a school system. It shows you the resilience of people's individuality and spirit. It's certainly always then, I guess, when you are homeschooled, you're different and things are different. And then if you're if you're already a weird kid, which I was and am, then you just know what's up. And, fast forward through, I guess, very, path less traveled kind of, beginning of my career from being essentially a street performer and then choosing a route of doing backyard shows in strangers' houses, which we organised through social media, fully independent grassroots, very you can't do this. And for me, it was always a question. As soon as people said you can't do it that way, I was always curious. perhaps a bit of a masochist as well. Like it was like, well, it looks hard and it looks like it's not really been done much, so I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
And when it came to that time, the first major stint I did without alcohol, it, I think, was immensely important. It was actually, this is the crazy part, which we'll talk about more, but it was actually easy.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy. It was that it was, and I'll explain as to why, but it was made easier by my upbringing. And I think depending on how and why you're doing it, I do believe that people will be surprised and could be surprised about the time away from something that seems like perhaps integral in their social and weekly kind of life.
You know, I feel the same way. I feel like that is my opinion on it. It's not a popular opinion to have. Like, this is actually not that bad, because obviously people have had a huge problem with drinking. Like, fuck you. Like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I guess for anyone who's given up without a problem, it's not impossible. Like, it's actually more rewarding than it is difficult. And it's just, I guess, the fear of giving it a go that keeps people away from it. We're very good at making our excuses why we drink. Mm-hmm. We're not great at considering the benefits of not drinking. It's been my experience of it generally. So before we get onto your sobriety, you ended up going to school from the 13 years old to 16 years old, is that
That's right?
Which is obviously the most formative years in most people's drinking lives. And at school, I think like this is probably true across all schools, it is cool to be rebellious, right? People are drawn to rebellious kids. Mm-hmm. When you're 13, 14, 15, 16, rebellious, in my experience, means drinking, smoking, breaking rules. So when you enter the school system for the first time, how did you find integrating with that new circle of friends, making friends? And did you go, I will drink, smoke or rebel to sort of win over the crowd?
So I had, I think, a particularly lucky, for a lack of a better word, a lucky entry into school. Mm-hmm. My sister had just gone to that school. She's a year above me, same story. And so there was that aspect. I also, at the time, had, blonde, white hair and perceivably was a surfer. Little do they know that, I would go on to do, 2 maths and 2 sciences, no art. And, seeing like maths and science, and like full in the books. And so they didn't know I was a nerd. At first I had, people assumed I was some cool surf kid, which I let that play out as long as possible until they realized. And I actually had my childhood girlfriend from the surf competitions I used to do. We went to the same board riders is what it's called. And my childhood girlfriend was in my grade,
Okay,
and so I had a ridiculous entry, like you can't have a more cushioned landing than that to any schooling experience, whether you're homeschooled or not. So that for me, I guess the ways, now that you say it, the ways I rebel in general or have rebelled as a teenager weren't maybe, they were different too. I wanted to impress my peers. Of course I want to impress my peers, but I think it was pretty clear to me that school to me was a game, and it was like, how am I going to win? Like what I'm here to do is get grades, to not hold back my life otherwise. And it was a relatively new experience to go to 3 years of school instead of 12, not including if you were in prep or whatnot. I was having a fresh experience. So I would say, however, that probably because of finishing school and that year 12, I was really young because I went up a grade, got in early. And so I was 15 for the first 2 terms of year 12 and 16 when I graduated. So funnily enough, the most partying I did really was like 16 to 20, I guess. That was, if there was any party period, that was it, because I graduated. You go to schoolies, and so that's where I did, the most of my drinking, which I wasn't particularly good at as it was, but that's where I did my drinking or smoking weed. That was the time. And then moving from, 16 to 20, and I'll detail, I guess, what life looked like in those years. But by the time I quit everything else to do music, I was 19. And as far as I took it upon myself willingly and in an excited manner to make music the only thing. And therefore I've been essentially working for myself for 10 years already at 29. And so when you have a passion like music, and that's, and a vision like that, you're just not interested in wasting time the same way.
Okay, here I was thinking school's going to be hard. You're the surfing nerd with a girlfriend. It's a flippin' breeze.
It was. I'm telling you, I got like they just didn't know if they knew how nerd I am. You know, I got lucky. So yeah, it was a blessed situation.
Okay, so let's talk about the party years. So 16 to 19 years old. Is that when you sort of started playing music in local bars or coffee shops, or was that the first time you hopped in the van and started travelling? Yeah, what do those years look like for you?
16 to 19, so graduated, and then you do, you do your whole schoolies things. And I would happily say if I'd actually dived into any other, drugs other than at that time smoking weed and drinking alcohol, but I just never did. And we can go on to, I guess, how your friend group does impact that.
For sure.
But at the time, I guess, I had pretty, we just were keen to surf. Friends were generally pretty athletic, but you've graduated. A lot of people were older than me. My friends are older than me, the people that I work with. And you also hey, I'm working, I've graduated. You're acting, you get your license at 17. You are acting as a pseudo adult, even before I was 18, working and paying my way, et cetera, et cetera. But there were definitely the times where I was partying more, and we go to these, epic, funny, big parties out on properties and stuff like that, and sleep upright in cars as four people in a small little, 4-door. And you'll never forget the first time that you projectile vomited over a balcony, and your friends, chucked them over your soldier like you were some embattled soldier being carried across, the Kokoda track by your mate, like it's a battle. And you won't forget those times. And that was 17, 18. Music was still relatively frivolous. I was working in a coffee shop job, playing, once I'd picked up guitar as I finished school. 2011 is when I started learning guitar, because my folks bought me a guitar on the last day of 2010 as a graduation present. And prior to that, I didn't play guitar. I played some upside down chords on a right-handed guitar. I'm left-handed, therefore, for those who aren't necessarily familiar with guitar, you just don't stumble upon left-handed guitars. Rarer than hen's teeth. And I guess those first couple of years until I was 19, basically, I was like, right, I'm doing this hella high water. Go out like what we all did on the coast. You go out a couple times a week, maybe go to the Thursday uni night, or you go, you always had some theory about why Friday or Saturday was better. And, and that was that period, I guess. That was that period of time in my life. And by the time I was pursuing music, when I first started pursuing music heavily, definitely there was still more partying, because it was so much fun, as far as there was really laid dopamine experience of not only were you partying, but you were doing something meaningful in your job, and you were surrounded by awesome people, and you were on this one-way adventure that you'd never been on. So there was such a huge amount of joy in that time. And I certainly, because I came out unscathed and I never pushed it. And like I said, I would happily say if I had tried harder drugs, but that for me and my crew, it was just smoking weed at that time, and drinking was already enough and a lot, which I'm mega thankful for.
For sure. The day that you gave up, so you're 19, is this the time where you're going, right, I'm gonna give up for sure? Well, no, 19 was the day you gave up your day job.
19 was the day I gave up my day job.
Which, that story I find both inspiring and confronting in equal measures. I'm like, this is so awesome, he gave up. I heard you say in the past, there was no signposts that you were going to make it, but you thought, screw it, I'll give up and give it all. Which I find inspiring. I find it confronting, because I can't do the same thing. I'm like, this is what I love doing, these conversations. I do this one day a week, and I've got 3 other jobs. And having the nuts to go, screw it, I'm just going to go all in, I do not yet have. So I applaud the 19-year-old you.
Thank you. And it's also, it's also easy to take those risks, because there was less of them. Again, we speak about when things are easier. And if I think about the commonalities, that time was easier. Why? Because you're 19. Like my folks said at the time, they're like, when else? They're like, do you want to do, when are you going to wait to do and take the risk? And so when you're 19, you haven't got a mortgage, you haven't got a child, depending on you haven't got a partner. Those are very real things that not having a family myself yet, immensely respect, that changes everything. And
Yeah.
so that's why I'm thankful at that time I took the risks that I really could take without being detriment to other people. You touched on the drinking being fun, and I think probably what's good to say is that there was maybe a shift in that 19 to 21, late 2015, where I decided to just curiously stop for a month, right?
Okay, yeah.
I would say I didn't exactly know why, but it was a gut feeling, and there's some very obvious factors. When you play shows like 5 days a week, and every day people want to celebrate with you, you have a beer at setup, you have a beer after. Goodness forbid you meet a beautiful girl, or you're with epic friends you haven't seen, or new friends you just made, and you drink some more, and all of a sudden, that's 3 or 4 beers without even being drunk, may I add, right? And if you do that 5 days a week, like, where are you at? And I do think that probably a spur of why, for example, I stopped smoking weed was I had an experience where it was the first time, and I remember why, it was the first time that I smoked it to try and rid some of my anxiety. And it was the first time I did it, and it was the last time I smoked weed, because it just completely flicked the switch for me. Before, it was fun.
Yeah.
And then it became something. The moment I did that, I was like, I'm out.
That anxiety was life anxiety or career or on stage? Yeah, what specifically?
No, not stage anxiety. It was life and circumstance of just, personal, suicide of someone close to us. It was just actually a local here, my brother's best mate, like, just coming out of surgery, chaos mode. And it just needed, for me, it just switched me off it. I was like, I don't even know if I had the conscious, well, I'm stopping now. It's just like, I was out. And I would say probably the thing that was the biggest marker for why I stopped drinking and went on this little month experiment was 2 reasons. One, I didn't like the idea of being like unfit or having like a little beer belly as like a 21-year-old. I didn't, and I wasn't there, but I also wasn't like, I was like, I mean, I'm trying hard to get a 6-pack, still don't have a 6-pack, but it was more erring on the side of, I was like, that's not cute at 21, and easy to happen, right? The second thing is, I'd say that the biggest marker was, I'd say, loneliness. I'd say at the time, I had a lot of pushing myself way hard, pretty lonely, living in a van, traveling all the time, never having any grounding. And I just felt like there was, if I reflect, there was an edge of like, there was some association with stress management and a bit to do with loneliness. And I can't tell you why, but that's what was there for me. And I didn't like that. And in the time, what began as a month, that would become, I think, about 4 years, the things that shifted in that time as to why it was easy to stay that way, or why it was a no-brainer, were also around to do mending loneliness. Yeah.
I wish I'd had the same headspace. So like, I used to act, and big thing in England is going to the Edinburgh Fringe, right? The whole theatre world or comedy world goes to the Edinburgh Fringe, which is 30 shows in 30 days, and it's a massive piss up. And for me, I never did the right vocal training or breath work. So like the dehydrating effects of drinking or smoking, just I would have, by like show 17, I had no voice. So I've always been surprised by singers who are drinking and smoking as much as they seem to, that they still have a voice. I'm like, I was cane. My voice went immediately. If you're doing 5 shows a week, like the voice is a very delicate thing to control, right? Did you ever have nights where your voice conked out?
That is like such a fine point. And I also want to add, by the way, I've actually never had the chance on a podcast or any long form to discuss this in length, which excites me immensely, because what you talk about in that cross-industry example, you have to see, some people can smoke and drink and play 6 days a week.
Yeah. And
maybe I could, but from what I understand about my body and my voice, for example, dude, I'm running now before every show because it helps my diaphragm. I do Wim Hof before every show for both nerves and for pushing back my inflammation. I do vocal warm-ups every time before I hop on stage. There's not a night that I don't. I'm mega hydration focused, more and more now. Moral of the story is that I don't know how people do survive on that. And I think if we look over a period of time that's more than a year or two, we see that people don't. People don't tend to continue to have that success. It's a quick burning flame regarding their health and how that sort of behavior impacts your voice. You know, I'm at that age now at 29 where this is the period where people do get their vocal injuries and vocal surgeries. And I don't want to do that. I'm not interested. And so it, to me, falls part of a bigger habit set that impacts my life in such a positive way that I'm actually just not interested. And I'm not saying that in a pompous or self-righteous way at all. I'm saying in genuine, I'm now just at this point not interested.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing in my world where I'm just not like, even with weddings, even with my off time, it's not what I do for my birthday. It's funny how it's just not a part of my life, culture, and community anymore.
Yeah.
And I got friends who it's totally part of that, and I love them, and that's not friends and family. That's not an issue to me, because this is just my little journey. So yeah, man, I don't know either how people do that 30 days, 30 shows in Edinburgh and drink and party and do all that and still have a voice, because I do all of what I'm doing to maintain my voice already. And so that's another big reason, is I'm like here to be as healthy and athletic as possible for stage.
Yeah.
And for my life. And so again, it's just another thing that just gets crossed off the list, because it's like, well, it just kind of backfires on all the hard work I'm doing.
For sure. I think a lot of people give up and they talk about the amount of time and energy that they get back that they used to spend in pubs or bars or hungover or thinking about booze or driving to and from bars, right? You're 21 when you give up, and you haven't made it in inverted commas yet, right?
Yep.
So what did you find yourself feeling hyper efficient? Were the gigs going better? Were you booking more? Were you traveling more? Were you leveling up as a human and a performer at that stage?
Absolutely. I think that's the part that makes it easier. So I still haven't figured out what the answer to this is, and it's going to be different for each person, but it started as a month for me. I really meant it. It was like a month. It wasn't I'm giving up. There's two sides to a coin, I think, on this subject. And again, I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this. You must seek a strategy when it comes to giving up something that's important to you. And there's been other things that have been harder than that for me. If I was to give up coffee tomorrow, I'd really need to have a strategy, because it's a part of my ritual. With drinking, I think we need to see, or with anything around addiction or mega habits, is how do you mentally approach it? Are we giving up forever, or are we giving up indefinitely?
Yeah.
If you saw my hands, they're clasped together right now, and I'm giving coin flips like you don't know what the heck I'm talking about. And I just feel maybe if you say I'm giving up till the day I die, it puts an end date that you're looking at, and it is forever away. Whereas if I'm doing this indefinitely, it's saying now. I'm doing this now. I don't know when it will end, but I think it's for the foreseeable future. And it means, for me, I think if I was to choose one or two, I would choose indefinitely opposed to never. They're a similar thing, but slightly different psychosomatic effects.
Yes.
In my case, it was a month. I was curious, and I hardly talked about it. And I think, there's an Alan Watts talk on YouTube about this, and he's like, you can't give the devil notice. And I'm not a religious man, but he's like, you can't give the devil notice, because who do you think the devil is? And he cracks up laughing.
Yeah.
And, it makes you reflect on not even giving yourself too much notice. Being, in some ways, casual. We can't always afford to, and there's other things where you have to be, depending on where you're at. And because I wasn't, aside perhaps some cure for loneliness and fatigue particularly, it hadn't become a problem. So that's why it was easy. And I always I would recommend strongly to anyone, if you're curious about this just for fun, you could just do it for fun. You could actually just stop and see how life is. And at 21, I do. And it was a month. And I remember it was maybe also, I was in Germany, I feel like at the time, traveling back from Stockholm. Last beer I had was at an Indian place, and then we into Germany, and so there's lots of the beer fest, Oktoberfest was on, and I was just casually going, no thanks, no. And the months that followed were just so glorious, no doubt challenges, but I was traveling with my sister and her then partner, so I had company. I had first, and that's when my sister became my manager.
Yeah.
I had help on the stress management of doing way too much as one person as an independent. I was running and doing like cross training, and so I was getting stronger and fitter and healthier. I then the next tour did something called the Runaway Tour, which was this massive Australian tour, and it was very a positive vision of how life could be and touring could be. And I had a couple of friends come on the road. One is a merch guy and one was filming. I had company. All of a sudden, my life just got so much better. It was like, why on earth would I? It's like, do you miss it? It was like, miss what? Like, as far as everything just got so much better. It was, to me, a part of why things got better. And talking about why I think we can go into after this, but it was just things, life got better as a whole for a number of reasons. Perhaps I was more invested in my health, did more proactive things to that, worked on the fact that I was lonely and why, worked on being overworked by getting, getting my first manager and management help. And so life just, 1 month came by, then 2 months came by, then 3 months came by, and 6 months came by, and and then at 3.5, 4 years, 4 calendar years later, I was still on that wicket because it just was a natural roll-on effect.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you just glossed over it, but the fact that you were in Germany during Oktoberfest during your first month of sobriety is like, well, if I could do that, I can do frickin' anything. But the way that you voice the two sides of the coin, I've never heard it put that way. And that's been a huge thing for me. So I originally gave up for a year because forever felt like too long. And the difference between giving up for a year and forever is a year or 30 days like you did, you are counting down days, okay? As soon as you get over a year or over your 30 days and it's forever or indefinitely, you're counting up. And that is a complete mind shift.
Wow.
Right?
Counting down versus counting up, that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
That's one's totally feels rather negative and one feels positive.
Exactly. That has been my experience of it. And now... And I think I'm very much, without realising it, I'm in the indefinite camp rather than forever, because forever still feels too terminal. I'm like, I'm never, ever, ever. But indefinite, I'm like, yeah, I can get through today, I can get through tomorrow, and that's a complete breeze. And actually, another thing that you touched on there, which we always talk about, is this idea of giving up alcohol is the least interesting thing about going sober. The interesting thing is doing the work. You discovering why you're lonely, discovering why you're overworked. How can I solve that? I'll employ my sister to be my manager. Like pulling in the people that are close to you to help you through the reasons that we drink or the reasons that are causing us stumbling blocks in life. I think that is the most fascinating thing about going sober, right? It's like all of the things that go around it, all the things that you spend your time and energy doing when you're not drinking.
I couldn't say it better. That's a really beautiful way to put it. And I think about this a lot at the moment in regards to efficiency on a couple of different things. I live a pretty busy life, just came back from 6 months of international touring straight, and next week on another tour. It's so amazing how I think a fundamental factor looking back and seeing now, because I am, although I've said nothing about it online, but like I'm back again on a just absolutely no. For me at the minute, an indefinite no. And the same feelings have arose and is curious doing it again these years later, where it's like not even a drink here or there. It's just at the moment, just no. The power of a positive no. I think that's something that is underestimated. And I think what you get is, it's not about saying no necessarily to the alcohol. Alcohol is like the instrument or the catalyst.
Yes.
It's then the fact that when you're at Oktoberfest and you don't really want to have a beer, you don't actually, beautiful vegan cakes outside, like I want her to be polite. I do. I want to be sociable. I want to have the cake with you guys. But I just ate and I'm feeling great, and I don't want, I don't actually want to.
Yeah.
And so in a really positive way, being like, oh no, no, thank you. That is something that's so underestimated, because you develop your willpower. And I must say that anything that develops your willpower, where you're standing over an ice bath, which I'm right into these ice baths, and every time you stand over the ice bath, you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to hop in this silly little freezer full of ice. Why am I doing this? And you're like, hey man, you want to do it because you're standing over the thing in a pair of boardies. So developing your willpower and getting better at harnessing that energy. There's probably some great studies now regarding the fact that you would get more dopamine from doing that than actually submitting to the thing that is easy now.
Yeah. The dopamine high from an ice bath lasts 12 hours, whereas cocaine, alcohol is all like 20 to 45 minutes, I think. Yeah.
Case in point, you know. And interestingly, the breathwork in the ice bath from the study that I read is the only thing that can increase your baseline dopamine, which is a crazy thought for those that haven't, and I haven't done a lot of research or reading into this, but our dopamine drops. We get these huge Monday blues. I still get them after tour. Mad, without the drinking, without the drugs. Post-tour blues, man, are like...
real.
Whoa. They're like a chemical nightmare. You know, like I am so depressed for a couple of days on and off. Like it's horrible. And there's to date nothing I've found other than you have to just write it out, because you have layered your experience of positivity. So let's say you don't drink, so you are conscious, you're meditating, you're doing your Wim Hof, you're playing shows, you're meeting epic people, there's cute babies getting held up like it's a Lion King moment in the front of the crowd. You're meeting all these people having truly meaningful experiences that are awesome. You plummet. We all plummet when we layer our experiences. I think that's an incredible find, is that when you layer with drinking and a really good time and good people and a beautiful environment, all of a sudden you're actually having a wicked, awesome high. And the cool thing about the ice baths, going back to that, and the breath work, was that it was one of the things that if you expose yourself to it over a period of time, you can increase your baseline level of dopamine. And that, to me, that's like increasing your actual biological happiness.
Yeah.
And that's like, that would be, I think, a huge reason to see, well, if I want to increase my biological happiness, like something that's a bodily thing, what will I do? Will I do my ice baths? Will I quit drinking because at the very least it's inflammatory?
Yep.
Will I start to get back to my circadian rhythm? Will I have more meaningful interactions? All those things, all of a sudden, yeah, man, it's the power of a positive no. I think that's something that in hindsight, and now I think in a culture that's very like and goodness forbid if you're an agreeable person, which I actually am, you don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable by saying no when they're offering you a drink, because they're doing a nice thing. They're actually trying to involve you. And so the power of a positive no, I think, is something that's underestimated, and you can use that. There can be many instruments. That might be coffee for someone, that might be weed for someone else, that might be, I don't know, phone time at night. But developing that willpower, I think, actually has been one of the most important factors across the board, period, for me. I'm surprised about how much of an impact it's had on my day-to-day life.
I love that concept of a positive no. I always find it weird, like now because of what I do for work, or what we're talking about now, people want to talk about things you don't do, you know? But I was fascinated by the fact that I just don't drink. And I'd much rather talk about something that I do, you know? It's just something that I say no to and most people say yes. It's fun, a weird concept to have to talk all the time about something that I just don't do anymore. But the music industry generally, I would imagine, is sort of soaked in alcohol and drugs. That's the sort of the perception that I have from the outside in. So 2 questions, I guess. Was there someone in it that was sober that inspired you to be sober? You know, was there one person like, well, if they can do it, I can do it? Or, you know, maybe it was someone who wasn't in the music industry. And then the second one would be, what's it like being in that industry on a tour, for example, where you're the one not drinking?
Well, I'll start with answering the first one. I think, and again, this is actually not something I've ever even talked about in an interview. I did have one very early incident in my life that has shaped my view around alcohol, and I think it's my earliest memory. And it was my mum saying that my granddad couldn't come back to the house because he was an alcoholic. And I must have been little, man. I was like 3. It's one of my formative memories. I can see the couch. I can see the phone. It's a phone with the cord still on it. And... you know, and obviously I didn't understand at the time the weight of the conversation, but you can see your mum's upset and you're more or less a toddler. And it took me a long time to forgive him for that. As far as I carried a lot of just like, man, I hate this dude.
Really?
Big time. Yeah. And I, on purpose, didn't, even once things got better and he got out of it and his relationships with his daughters, including my mother, got better, I still was just like, just black about it inside, you know. It was like, I'm purposely not going to see you to punish you for screwing up. Until thanks to my then partner, my ex, a wealth of knowledge and insight, she was like, well, that's pretty heavy. Like, as far as like everyone else is chill, and now you're just like, you know, you're still carrying that. And I had to say, well, he had a second family after, who's my now aunties, who are my age.
Yeah.
My half aunties are my age, who I work with. One of them is my manager.
Yeah.
I tour with the other one, and my life is so rich with them in it. My life is richer with them in it. And so where do I, as a young man, put the finger on my grandfather about, you know, should he have stopped and got his act together before my aunties were born? Because he didn't have his act together when my aunties were born, and a lot of chaos there, but I have my aunties. So being able to see a generational positivity towards a whole situation, that you cannot pull that out. And what I'm trying to say is that also helped me have understanding and appreciation for that. Maybe, you know, you're listening and where you're at, or where someone else is at in your life, having some trust in the process, which if you aren't religious, it can be hard to have trust in a process and to have multi-generational trust in something. And so I have that beautiful example of something that was quite negative that now I see, I'm like, you know what? I'm happy that things were chaotic enough, including his drinking, to the point that is a part and parcel of why my aunties exist. And I love them, and my life is better with them. And so I'm like, thank you. Thank you for even not pulling up when you should have, because everything's worked out perfectly. Yeah. And now he has, and things are awesome. That was a key to first part of the first question.
Yeah.
That was a key memory that I think impacted me. My mum and my dad, particularly my father, is like a male figure. You know, I never saw him have more than 2 beers. He was, you know, a very disciplined and not someone who was, you know, the out of control guy. And so that was my role model, you know. So I had that sort of early memory. I had my role model there. I wouldn't say, to my knowledge, I would say I had more of an inward journey on, there wasn't someone necessarily else in music who I looked up to in their sobriety. That was quite an inward thing for me. Yeah. I don't know if there wasn't an example at the time, to be honest. It wasn't a clear example. Now I have clear examples, not about sobriety, but health. I've definitely taken notes from the likes of Xavier Rudd and John Butler, who I've been lucky to get to know a bit over the years now. For example, with running, I've looked up to them because of things like running and their health, and I see patterns of how they live their lives, and I'm like, right, okay. And I've taken notes and I've applied them, you know. But when it came to sobriety, I had personal examples, but not professional examples. I think, if I can remember the second question, what's it like being
sober in a boozy industry? Yeah.
Man, because I did that, two of my closest friends who I still work with today, 8 years on from that moment, I went on tour, but I very much was like, if you want to drink, if you want to smoke, as long as it's not affecting your work, I'm not here, like, unless you're like ruining the tour, go for it. Like, as far as like, I would go out sober. I'd go out with everyone and dance and party and like be the sober driver. Like, I continued with life. We developed very understanding relationships as a result, as young guys and girls together. We developed this understanding relationship of mutual acceptance. I think that is really important, and they also, and it's a credit to them as people, because they also held that space for me as their sober friend, you know, and they didn't put it on me. For sure. They didn't push it. Yeah. And so that, I think, means we had our own bubble. We were kind of all these misfits that, you know, misfits that just formed our own little world. And then reflecting on how it impacts touring life now, I think that, you know, I got right into running obsessively, because I don't do anything in halves. Got right into running on the last tour, and, you know, watching the subtle effect of then I'm running with my buddy Kim, who was on tour with me as the support act. Yeah. I'm running with Charlie, who was the filmer, and then we're running with Brad, who was the photographer, and then Ria and Lisa are going to gym together, and Nathan goes and does his big walks, and Rourke, my brother's doing 100 push-ups, you know, side staged every show. He's my stage manager. Yeah. We just got into a rhythm, and I do think we positively affected each other. And so they still drink, and they still, you know, smoke and do whatever, you know, like it's not like some sobriety bus, but we coexist.
Yeah.
And it's like our tour is mega positive, and no matter whether you are sober or not, the key thing that we need to find, which is a big lesson for me that I'm working on. Shout out Kim Churchill, amazing Australian musician, but good buddy of mine. Are you unwinding or are you unraveling? Is the way he put it.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me, you know, because we all need to unwind. Like I have to unwind, and I'm not always good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's unraveling, and we just have to be honest with ourselves when are we unwinding or are we unraveling? Because some people have a drink and they're unwinding. Some people have a smoke, they're unwinding. Some people have a drink, have a smoke, and they're unraveling.
Yeah.
And that, I think, but we must find ways to unwind, because you can go sober and be a pent up mess if you don't find ways to positively unwind.
I've found that running has been one of the best things for me to do as an alternative way to socialise outside of a bar or pub. Like you're doing it with friends and people you work with. Like I've got a friend who visited recently who's like a big drinker, and he was so up for running. And I was like, I think men particularly are like, we're more comfortable having conversations shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face.
That's cool. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's a big thing. So like shoulder to shoulder therapy is a thing in men. So like, running with someone and being able to have these deep conversations, not necessarily eye to eye, is a really beautiful way to connect, not over a pint, is what I found. But you said that you picked up running during your last tour. I know you've spoken quite openly about in 2017 when you did this tour where you felt an element of burning out. And I feel like all of us go, touring must be great. It's just parties and girls and like adulation and applause and like it's the best thing in the world ever, surely. What did a burnout look like for you?
Oh, jeez. It's a good question. This is not going to be a good... You can, despite all your best efforts, even being sober and doing all these healthy things and not partying, still have a burnout.
Yeah.
And you can still work too hard. And that's maybe the unwinding factor in not listening to yourself. There's so many things in it. But I would say it's not like you get sober and everything just magically fixes itself.
Yes.
But at least you're not adding to the pile of chaos. If I was drinking through that time, man, I just don't know how I could possibly handle more pressure than I was already handling.
Yeah.
I really don't. That's just the truth for me. I don't know if I would be strong enough to have been drinking through, for example, that time.
I was like trailing through your song lyrics, right, to see if I could find any clues to drinking or the type of drinker that you were or the experience or whatever. So the Burnout Tour 2017, 2018 is when you released Love Me Now. Or it was released, I don't know if you wrote it then. But yeah, in it you sing, do you ever feel like just getting drunk to deal with what's been going on? And is that lyric the way that you were drinking? Was that the way that you were seeing people drink? Was that a thought that you had during a mad tour, like, this is a temptation to drink because this is fucking mental, what's going on here? Like, where did that lyric come from?
It makes me think there's another lyric in a song, and I can't even think of what song. It's one of mine, may I add. There's a lyric in a song also around drinking that I can't. Probably one if people want to listen for fun. It's a song called Tell Me. And it's off an album called 4 Feet in the Forest. And I think that alludes a lot to burnout. It was like the first time the lyrics in that, like, I didn't know how to say I needed help.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't very good at looking after myself. That, although it doesn't allude specifically to drinking, I don't believe in that song. It alludes to the biggest challenge and why you drink. And if I think about it now, part of the reason you drink when you tour, man, you're so tired. You're so tired all the time. You're doing your major thing at like 10 p.m. at night. We're getting a massive dopamine. You're getting all these lights. You're getting real interactions. Your sleep schedule at best is 2 till 10. And if you've got any insomnia, sometimes it's 4 or 5 because you're so hyped up. I understand why, and like for me, I've again, like, you know, I have these like lion's mane and another one called reishi, 2 mushrooms that I have in my tea at night because that helps me come down. I have that with a bit of cacao and maple syrup or something, right? It's intense. Touring is physically intense. The biggest trade-off I've made in my career is fatigue, like proper issues with fatigue because it's so real. And maybe sometimes you just want to drink on tour because you need the sugar. Yeah. It's energy. It's the same reason you want to have a coffee or have this. It's like, it's sugar. And it helps you numb to like the fact that you're like, I have only slept for 3 hours and I'm playing a show. Like, I'm exhausted. But not for me. I would say the feeling around love me now, and do you ever feel like just getting drunk to deal with what's been going on? It's that desperation feeling that I've had where you just like, you can do it with coffee, you could do it with a cuppa, you could do it with alcohol, you could do it with smoking, anything. You're just like, man, I just want to switch my brain off right now. I just want to go on my phone and scroll endlessly. Like, I want to go, I just want to flick. Perhaps it's, the prefrontal cortex. I don't know. The decision-making part, I just want to flick that thing off.
Yeah.
And that is something that I had felt around drinking and otherwise. And I think it's a universal feeling. And I think because alcohol is perhaps such a common part of at least Western culture, it's a reference that you can make where it speaks to a truth that people are like, yeah, I know that feeling. And when you sing it with that feeling, they're like, I get that. And it's like an admittance. It's like, do you ever feel like just getting drunk, dealing with what's going on?
Yeah.
Because we all have real stress in our life, and we just got to figure out how to, unwind opposed to unravel. And an important part of that whole journey for me that I didn't even get to share was I then got to this point, and it had been 4 calendar years, and there became a new challenge for me. And the new challenge was that I had, again, a bit of a masochist, I had proved the point. I was like, I know I can not drink, and my life is as good, if not better. That's a key thing as well. I'd say anyone listening is that, like, my life, I know from the lived experience, which was so valuable, was like, life is as good, if not better. That's my knowledge on the situation.
Yeah.
It then became well, why can't I just like have a drink here or there? Like, have I proved this point to myself? And at the time I had, and that was, and I remember that year getting drunk twice. That's all it took for me to be like, this sucks.
Yeah.
This is like, I remember the 2 times. It was like once at this little pub with friends, and it was utterly hilarious. And it was a funny as night because my friends, some of which had been friends with me for 4 years, had never seen me have a drink.
Yeah.
Were freaking out. So the first night was funny, and I remember the second night that, I got drunk, and I was like laying in bed going, this sucks so much. Like, this is so average. Yeah. This is so subpar. Like, this sucks. Like, for me, this experience sucks. Like, you're sitting there, head spinning, and so that became the new challenge for me, was like, well, I've proved to myself this, and now I want to be able to just, once you have this experience for a month or for 2 months or for 2 years or for 4 or whatever, depending on where your alcohol relationship is at, it's impartial. Example, a couple of years ago, I was trying to heal my gut, and sugar was a big thing. So, there I quit sugar, including alcohol, for 3 or 4 months, and I didn't think about it twice. Like, it's impartial. And that's the beautiful, freeing thing that I would encourage anyone who wants to feel more free in their life, is that developing the impartial relationship to something like alcohol is something I'll have for the rest of my life. It's like, I have it or I don't have it. It's cool. And then if I don't, like now where it's been another 3 months, was 3 months this week, where it's like intentionally, I was like, nah, I didn't even want to have a drink. My precursor this time was developing more of my willpower. And I've been on a major athletic kick more than ever before. I'm like trying to be as fit and strong as I can possibly be in my life. Like, I'm pushing my outer limit of that alongside touring. And so it just doesn't fit into that puzzle. You just look at that on paper, and developing that impartial relationship, I just think, is so amazing, because then even during that time, it'd just be a month or 2. I came past a bottle the other day, and I was like, I just can't even imagine going in there. Like, it's just not part of my world. Yeah. It's just not there. And when you develop the impartialness to whatever that is in your life that seem to matter, some things matter. Your relationships matter. Your health matters. But my relationship to alcohol was impartial. Yeah. And I have the knowledge of experience that my life is as good, if not better, without it. And that is like, I can't describe to you the power of that. It's just such a positive feeling.
For sure. And we talk a lot about the idea of having control over alcohol rather than letting it control you, right? That's the goal. That is the goal for anyone who's sober or sober curious. Like, I just don't want it to be a factor in my life that makes me make decisions I don't want to make anymore.
The tie I see between that and your relationship with coffee or that and your relationship with your phone or with Pinterest or with Instagram. Interestingly, also through this time, I've had such minimal interaction with my Instagram and my social media. I've been getting a lot of it, helping have it run with my team. Man, so maybe I'm just feeling the impact of a more positive dopamine experience. You know, perhaps that's literally that simple. Maybe it's not even more esoteric than that, but I like to think it is more esoteric than that, and I feel in the world more. And so again, there's perhaps another, I'd say the social media thing's a big one, and we just have to, I think we also have to try and see what leads me to want to make bad decisions. What's the things? And I still make some terrible decisions. I still have so many regrets. But I think I have less of them than if I had the glaze, you know, if I had the things that would kind of soften my judgmental impact on myself or my awareness. There's no card. I can't pull the I was drunk card, which is sad sometimes. But you know, if I can't pull it, there's like, you got full accountability, and therefore you aren't going to wake up tomorrow and be like, well, I'm going to pull that card. You're like, you don't have it. You know, you've got no monopoly on that.
It was such a good excuse for so long. We've lost it.
I know. So, you know, but it's, man, it's a crazy journey. And I just feel like in a really positive, like encouraging, like I just don't see, you know, I think it's easy now we're in this like time where everybody has the answer, right? And we're all looking for the answer. I think that's good. We're looking for the answers on everything. And I think by saying to people, particularly who are sober curious, being like, you don't have to make it permanent. Like you could just do it and just see what happens, right? I just think that what I'm trying to tell is the story of such immense positivity, because I think that like encouraging people to do something because of the positive impact it has on your life is such a great way. Instead of saying I'm losing something, it's like, what are you gaining? You know, you talk about so often, you're talking about on this podcast something you don't do. It's quite ironic. It's a paradox unto itself. And for me, like I said, gaining impartialness, gaining more willpower, gaining lived experience of something, I just can't recommend, particularly to anyone who's like in their 20s, early 20s. Like that was such a fundamental experience in my life, and I'm just so thankful. And I would do it again in a heartbeat, you know. Like it just was one of the best decisions I made, even if it hasn't been 10 years straight, but for that 3 or 4 years in particular, that started off as a concept of a month. Like one of the most important and just positive experiences. And I think people, if their curiosity gets the better of them, I would 100% recommend trying it at least.
I think that's a beautiful, beautiful place to call it. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. I think yours in particular, particularly speaking to 20-year-olds, which is like the demographic that we want to get. Like those are the years when we had all of our regretful stories. I feel like those people in particular are sober or sober curious or just thinking about it. I think you are going to appeal to them. The way you speak to it is exactly the way that they listen. So I want to thank you for reaching out to them. I also want to, I think we've caught you at a really interesting time. I feel like you've off the back of a tour, about to go on another one, like in a nice space in your life, it feels. I just want to say I'm thankful for you sharing that, because I can feel it. I can feel that you're in a good place, and it's cool to be around it. I want to finish with just a quick story, which is, my wife is Liz, right? And we moved up here 2 years ago. And a lot of people come visit in the first 2 years. Like, what the hell's Sunshine Coast like? So when we pick up people from the airport, we bring a pack of Pringles, and we bring a non-alcoholic drink. We call it the Hey and Liz Express. And we pick them up, and then we put a Ziggy Alberts album on, and you are the soundtrack to our welcome to the Sunshine Coast. And that, I thought, I've always wanted to tell you that. I want to thank you for being the sound of the Sunshine Coast to us whenever visitors come up.
Man, that's so beautiful. You know, that makes me think about what I'd do if I'm taking friends on an adventure. I put on Ben Howard. You know, that's my equivalent. So I feel thankful to be able to tell a story which actually I haven't even really, beyond a couple of social media posts, been able to tell things people don't know at all about my upbringing in this conversation. So I feel really thankful for that. And I feel just lucky that in this time, being able to speak from like a place of positivity, which includes the positivity of my sober experience or the positive notes, you know, that's, I feel thankful for it to not just be reflective and be here today, the shell of a person. I'd like to close, if I could, by saying that I look up to so much people who are in a harder position. I don't think that's something I don't envy, and I think I understand more now, but there's things I don't understand about addiction and how ingrained it is in people's lives. And I just want to say that to anyone who would be listening that's having a less frivolous experience than what I had in my exit, that I look up to those people. I really do, because it's easy. It's easy to stop before something's a problem. And by circumstance of your life and your experience and your upbringing, you might have been in a harder spot. And I just think, I just want to acknowledge that being on here talking, just to say that, like, I don't understand that, but I just back you, and I think things can be better. And when you think of your life and people's lives being more positive, that's just like, that's what we're here for, you know?
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you so much, Ziggy.
Thank you for having me. An absolute pleasure.
Right, lads, do you want a cup of tea?
Yeah, go on then.
So there it is, Ziggy Alberts on Sober Awkward. What a treat.
I learnt so much from that chat. What struck me most about Ziggy is not only is he incredibly grounded, but also grateful for all that he's achieved, but he's also a guy that thinks so deeply about his craft. Giving up alcohol was just one lever he wanted to pull, along with focusing on his exercise, his ice baths, his diet, all of those things to fundamentally make him a better performer. He was making those decisions when he was 21. Right, that was before he was even a success. I've got no idea how he did that in his 20s.
Amazing. That was what I found so inspiring too about this. How many singers have gone off the rails, then learnt from their mistakes and gone sober? Ziggy actually did it the other way around. He gave up before developing a problem, a bit like Haim, whilst he was still able to do it without too much struggle. By doing this, he gave himself the best possible chance of succeeding at his passion.
I can't think of anyone not drawing something from that. I wish I had the focus when I was in my 20s. The other thing I loved about this was his theory on giving up forever versus indefinitely.
Yeah.
That just made a lot of sense to me and put into words, I guess, what I'd been feeling for a long time, which is really what singers and poets are meant to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Give words to your thoughts that you can't say good.
Yeah, well done, Hamish. His story in overcoming alcohol might be very different to yours. You might have struggled more or battled it for years, but it goes to show that you don't have to reach rock bottom to give up. In fact, it'll be much easier if you make the decision to go sober before you reach that point.
Are we going to head down to see him at the end of this tour then, Vic? I
would love to,
end of November he's going to be in Brisbane. Another awkward sober night out. My pointing, dancing, you're doing your stomping.
I'll be doing lots of stompy dancing if we go and see Ziggy Alberts, Hamish. Yes.
And is that the River Stage, which is where we saw Fatboy Slim?
Yes, it is. But that is the best venue, actually, isn't it, in Brisbane? That is amazing. It's kind of this outdoor auditorium. It's brilliant.
I like the idea of just having one dance floor that we fully commit to.
Oh, yes.
It's like a safe space. We know we can sober dance there. Whatever's on at the River Stage, we go.
Okay, so we're going to Ziggy Alberts in November, and then we think, well, I'm dragging you to the Chemical Brothers in February.
Are you? Yeah. Not as much as my wife is dragging me to the Wiggles at the beginning of December.
Right, okay, I need to talk to you about that off show.
Go on.
I have been to the Wiggles.
And?
It was the biggest nightmare of my life.
Oh,
yeah, the queue to get in.
Excited.
Yeah, queue to get in. The kids don't even look at them. They're just crawling around the furniture. It's terrible sound. It's just not a good show.
I was going to go dressed as a Teletubby to say, I don't care, I'm a rebel.
Oh God, that is going to be the most sober awkward thing we've ever done. I will come and film it just to see how awkward, because people just go like, who's that guy?
Yeah.
What a dork.
Can you come
Absolutely
without a
not,
child
no.
to the Wiggles gig? No. I reckon that is illegal. I don't think you can actually go.
No, don't get me wrong. I love the Wiggles. I do love the Wiggles, Hamish.
But
live, it's a no-go with kids. It's just awful. Because they don't appreciate it. I appreciated it. It was the fact that the kids didn't appreciate the little brats.
Pricks.
Yeah.
I like the idea of going, what were your last 3 gigs that you've been to live? Fatboy Slim, Ziggy Alberts, the Wiggles. Yeah. I like that as a sentence.
Love it. We just want to say a huge thank you to Ziggy Alberts for coming on our show. What a privilege, Haim.
What an honour. He's welcome back anytime.
Anytime he can come on, we love him. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you're questioning your relationship with booze, you're struggling to moderate, or your hangovers are causing anxiety, it might be time to reach out for some support.
Yeah, just talk to a mate about how you're feeling, contact a local doctor, find an AA or sobriety group. Vic's got one.
Yeah, just head to www.cuppa.community.
Remember, if you're questioning yourself, it might be time to seek support.
Even though this journey can be awkward, it is definitely worth it. And if you've enjoyed the Sober Awkward podcast, don't forget to review it, rate it, and share it with your mates.
They have to share it with their mates?
Yeah, of course they do. I'm not doing this for nothing, Hamish. Bloody hell.
How do they share it?
I don't know, just write it on